Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Electricity Canada's Conversation Series. Electricity Canada is the national voice for sustainable electricity for its members and the customers that they serve. My name is Farhan Mirza, and I'm pleased to be your host for today's webinar. I would like to first begin by acknowledging that the land on which I am broadcasting to you from today is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be present in this territory. I would also like to recognize Canada as the land of the First Peoples, Inuit, and Métis. I would like to pay homage to the Indigenous peoples, past, present, and future, that continue to work, educate, and contribute to the strength of our country. I would like to recognize that the land is shared through historic treaties, developed through contemporary treaties, and one that continues to be unceded territory. The conversation series features presentations from Electricity's corporate partners, and this series will highlight a variety of Canadian and international solutions to current and future challenges faced by our industry. Working with our partners, these webinars have been developed to be of specific interest to those working in the electric utility space from generation through to the customer. For a list of upcoming sessions, please check out the events section on our website at electricity.ca. Just before we get going, a couple of housekeeping items. Our session today, again, is scheduled to go from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Questions can be asked, and I'd certainly encourage you to do so as they come to mind by typing them into the Q&A function on your Zoom screen, and we will ask them at the end of the session as time permits in the order that they have been submitted. And finally, please keep an eye out on our future sessions and events on our newsletter, monthly newsletter, Current Affairs, which goes out to about 5,000 subscribers and is the place to go for Canadian electricity industry news. If you'd like to receive this newsletter, we please encourage you to go do so on our website and subscribe at electricity.ca. So today on the conversation series, we'd like to welcome back PowerPlan, who will be talking to us about ERP best practices from a CFO's perspective. Today is the second in a two-part series of panel discussions examining the best practices and challenges experienced by financial leaders during ERP transformations. Topics for today's session will include brownfield versus greenfield implementations. What do finance leaders need to get right in a platform-led finance transformation? What are some of the logistical paths of implementation and more? Today's session will be hosted again by Richard Pickering and James Major from PowerPlan. Welcome, James and Richard. And our guest speakers today are from PwC, Bernie Semenjuk, from KPMG, Vinod Kumar, and Praj Dumal from EY. Gentlemen, welcome to the conversation series. Vinod, let's turn the webinar over to you to introduce yourself a little bit more, as well as pass it over to our panelists. Thank you.
Thanks, Farhan. Good afternoon, all. Thanks for taking time today. Myself, Vinod Kumar. I'm the partner national leader for SAP and managed services, leading for management consulting here in Canada. And as KPMG, we are business-led transformation lens is what we do. I'm here to talk more about the questions from the business lens. So looking forward to the conversation. To you, Bernie.
Thanks very much, Vinod, and good afternoon, good morning to all the folks joining us from east to west across Canada. I'm Bernie Semenjuk with PwC. I lead our Oracle practice across Canada, and I've been in the Oracle space for quite a number of years, led a large number of projects across Canada, both in utilities, back office, as well as CIS projects, and looking forward to the discussion today. And I'll ask Praj to continue on.
Thanks, Bernie. Hey, everyone. My name is Praj Dumal. I'm a solution architect with EY, and power and utilities is my sweet spot and my focus. I've been a trusted advisor for utilities with large-scale transformation projects for the last 15 plus years. Very excited to be here, to be talking to you guys and discussing some of the key questions troubling the utilities today. So thank you and happy to be here. I'll pass it on to James.
Unmute, James. Mute. James Major from PowerPlan. I lead our industry strategy and advisory team. And like many of you or all of you on the call, I worked in the Canadian utility and am familiar with the challenges. I spent nearly a decade at ENMAX Corporation in Calgary, Alberta.
Thanks so much, James. And thanks also to Electricity Canada and the panelists for taking time out of your day today to help us and host today's webinar. We had a lot of fun last week with many of you all who are coming back for this week's session, which is fantastic, and some new faces. That's really great to see. We even had some great feedback from last week's presentation that it's time for James and I to take this on the road. So we do have another event planned for later on this summer, where we want to move this from that virtual space to in person. So look out for those types of invites. So maybe we can kind of start, and who are we all about, and what is PowerPlan? Well, I know a lot of you on the call today are pretty familiar with our panelists and the companies that they're from. So thank you, KPMG, PwC, and EY for taking time to join us today. But maybe I can quickly tell you a bit about PowerPlan and who we are. So I'm Richard Pickering, and I'm based in Whitby, Ontario. Matter of fact, I'm around the corner from our friends over at Alexicon. And I'd also like to introduce the rest of my colleagues and Team Canada to this call as well. So these are PowerPlan employees that are joining us from coast to coast. So team, can I just ask you quickly to turn your cameras on? A little smile and wave to the audience, that'd be great. So my colleagues I have today from coast to coast are from BC, Alberta, here in Ontario. So hi Maria, hi Corey, Lorena, Jamie, Bonnie, Mike. Thanks again, team, for taking the time to join with us today. Now, a little bit about PowerPlan, a quick commercial, and then we're going to dive right into today's webinar. We just celebrated, actually, our 30th anniversary. We're proud to serve more than 200 plus clients, including over 90% of the investor-owned utilities in North America. Now, PowerPlan 30 years ago came up with a pretty simple realization. The more fixed assets the utility has, the more challenging it's going to be for them to manage them financially and strategically understand how these compliance requirements impact the treatment then of each asset. So what our industry-leading solutions do is bridges that language and information gap, which aligns and transforms the data between ops and finance, their primary systems allowing your teams and your systems to focus on what it is they do best. So with PowerPlan, those systems become more valuable. Now I've told you a little bit about PowerPlan. Let's get into the questions, but really first, we want to hear from you. So with that, Frank, can I ask you to launch our first polling question and over to the audience? So we have a couple of questions here for you to take part in. What is and what are you looking at for your ERP transformation? So in terms of timing, coast to coast, are you finished? Are you currently going through the process right now? Are you looking to start maybe this year, next year? Or is this being pushed out now until 2027 and beyond? So I can see a lot of you are already taking part of this poll. That's great. I'll let you kind of complete that, and then we'll dive into the results. Okay, pretty impressive. Maybe, James, looking at this, we have almost 80%, I would say 84% are looking to start this process either 2025, 26, or 27 and beyond. What about that?
Yeah, I think it's huge, and it's a lot of what we hear in the market, and it's really interesting. And I think a really good reason to have the panelists with us today, as there is going to be a big driver for expertise, for knowledge of how to execute these critical programs over the next 5 years.
Okay, and panelists, we can maybe use that for today's fireside chat, even though we are virtual. Well, let's pretend we're sitting campfire here, but let's maybe look at that through today's lens of what is the plan, kind of going out in the future in the next couple of years. So let's look at our first questions then. So going into question number 1. And James, I'll start with you, and then let's talk to the panelists. So how then, when we're looking from a PowerPlan lens, how do we align business and IT goals with these large-scale transformation projects? So what are some things that utilities should be looking for?
I think the biggest thing from my perspective is really between finance and IT aligning the goals and what are the outcomes we want to see. Is this strictly a technical exercise that we're going through to remain compliant, or is this a bigger transformation project? And I think agreeing on that, the question's kind of phrased from a transformation, but what does that mean? Is this truly actually going to be something where we see a lot of change in the business, or are we reskinning existing items? And when you get that and you say, yes, we want to affect change, it leads to needing 2 things. One is best in breed systems. What systems are going to be able to deliver on that vision that we've set forth going forward? And secondly, making sure that you have the executive sponsorship to do this. And that doesn't necessarily mean that your executive sponsors have to be in every meeting, supporting and making every decision, but having people that they've trusted and delegated that power to, and having a big authority on the project to say, this is the direction we're marching forward because of X, is a big thing and really allows you to align that business and IT goal because they are the voice of the executive at that point.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks so much, James. Maybe Praj, what have you seen kind of in your space and in talking to various utilities about this?
So one thing, what James alluded to, I'd like to expand a little bit, is this is one of the largest investments you will be making for your customers for the coming few years, right? And possibly even decades. Look to the current system that you have. You've probably had it for 1, 2, or even 3 decades, or even longer in some of the larger utilities. So when we make this decision, I would really caution, and I would really encourage all the business and IT leadership to think about this as a large-scale transformation and to not look at it as a mere checkbox exercise, as a technical migration, right? Although there are various factors that will help provide input to that decision, but at a minimum, there should be a collaborative approach. Like, it shouldn't be, or it shouldn't look like an IT-led transformation, because that's one of the leading causes of failures for these transformations. Is business looks at it as IT-driven and then don't come to the table, don't participate, are not accountable. So having a cross-functional team of stakeholders is very crucial. The accountability of this should be with each business group, including IT. And if you notice, I'm not saying business and IT, it's a cross-functional team. Everyone should be at the table, everyone should be responsible. IT should be the enabler in the driving seat because there's a large involvement of technology, but hand in hand, step in step should be also business, because this is their chance of rethinking their business. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it's good. And I think before I kind of throw over to Bernie, it's a topic that maybe came up last week as well, Praj, is the timing of it. So as utilities coast to coast, think about when's the last time we went through a project of this scale? Decades is really what it could be. So that's, I think, really, obviously stating the obvious, how crucial, looking at some of these transformations really are. So yeah, it's great. Bernie.
Yeah, I echoing some of the points that Praj and James had brought up, that this is really, when you're embarking on a transformation program, it really needs to be viewed as something that the organization is doing, and it's not finance or IT, it's really collectively. And so, what I've encouraged my clients to do is really focus on developing, prior to starting an ERP transformation program, develop the vision for the program. Develop the vision that's the right vision for your organization. What are your strategic drivers? What does success look like? How are you going to measure that? And put that into an actual, ERP vision with guiding principles that drive a practical approach to, actually executing on the project. And by establishing that vision, you get the message it tightened down right from the executives to, business stakeholders to IT stakeholders, that this is the direction we're going as an organization. This is why we're doing the project. This is how we're going to measure it. And then you can also start to anticipate what some of the barriers or potential roadblocks may be with that vision in mind, and you can start to put in place strategies to mitigate that, whether, we're going to talk about change management later on, but, the strong and visible leadership that Praj was touching on. So I think all of those elements of, before you embark on a project like this, really establishing that ERP vision for the program and having a collective discussion that's cross-functional, as Praj was alluding to me, is really critical to the success of these types of programs.
Yeah, okay. One thing that, I know we didn't have this question last week. This wasn't a question that we went through, but something that you just talked about right now, kind of cross-functional teams, and a topic that came up last week were, these various teams that had to have mandatory meetings. I think that the time was maybe monthly, James, bi-monthly, or something like that. And it was a great idea to make sure that everybody had that same vision. James, maybe have you seen something that, kind of taking what that was from last week, that idea that, Bernie's saying, how do you have these cross-functional teams? How do we continue these meetings to make sure that we stay to this vision? Mute again.
It's really about empowerment and making sure that people are on the same page and in the same room. That's where we've seen a lot of issues, and I think everybody kind of touched on it. If you're operating in silos, you end up building multiple great systems that don't talk to each other, and you end up with that. So whether it's, your steering committee cadence, your executive steering committee, your cross-functional architect team, having adjacency there is really important.
Yeah. Okay. Great topic. Thank you all. Let's look at the next question then. So I think we talked about this very quickly. Change management best practices. And James, I'll come to you first, and then I think I'll jump over to Vinod. But what do we do to empower like these internal stakeholders and really make sure that this is happening and living within the utility?
Yeah, and I think the adjacency comment from the last question really stands out there. And one of the ways we like to think about this is a lot of times you'll hear, I can't live without so-and-so doing X for me and carrying on their day job. But the biggest thing is, can you live with a system that's built by someone other than them for the next 20 years? How do you replace that person? And how do you empower them to make decisions? How do you harness that knowledge? But then also, how do you empower kind of the next generation of leader? We've seen a big change, and we know that there's a level of attrition coming to the power and utilities sector. And how do we address that? And how do we use these programs to build the next experts, the next leaders? And then from a user adoption perspective, I think one of the big things, and we've had great success with partners like KPMG, PwC, EY leading the testing for these programs, that your testing is really your training. And so having a significant involvement from a wide variety of people, having their hands in the system sooner rather than later, involved early and often, really allows them to feel empowered and also see the system beforehand, so you have less issues with adoption once you've gone live.
Okay. Thanks, James. So Vinod, you've seen many transformations in your time.
Yeah.
Kind of a little bit of a spin now onto change management, but what are you seeing here?
I mean, again, going back to the foundation of what change management is, it's like a structured approach transitioning from our current state to a future state, be it system, be it people, teams. I want to just define that first, because then we can focus on, like, an OCM is one of those areas where it's often acknowledged but always under-resourced in most large programs. And yet everybody knows that one of the big risks on program is that change is not done so well. And we have seen like time and time again where we have built the best systems, it is with the best design and solution, but it falls short because people impact was not accounted and change was not really enabled as such, right? So what do we do? I just want to set the context, because there are programs which is spending millions of dollars with like spending a lot of money on the technology side, data side. We do 6 months of process, harmonizing business processes, etc. But I think we need to give the same importance to a transformation program is for change management. It's a core component. And it's not like you do it like side of the desk activity, right? It's part and parcel of the program. As Jim said, he alluded to embedding and what we call like shifting left. You need to make sure that the change starts like day one. When I say day one, and most transformation program, if you really see, what do we do as consultants is we do a vision workshop. We do a stakeholder alignment session as an upfront activity right through either before kickoff or as part of the kickoff. And all that is to say is like it is so important that it is not even like when the project is started. The change starts even when the vision for a transformation program is started. So how is the exec sponsor like enabling this whole transformation program from a change lens? It's not about just signing a check, I got the money, yeah, here we go, we enable a transformation program, but actively engaged and explaining why this transformation is important to his business leaders to people managers to end users. It's a very critical component. And in the last 10 years, like I've had 3 large transformation, like few $100 million, multiple years over like multiple countries. They hired like a VP business transformation to run the program. So getting somebody dedicated to represent the business and running that as a program alongside with a CIO or an IT leader, is equally important. It's not about getting the technology correct, but it's also about getting the change management correct, right? So if I want to like use the metaphor, OCM or a change management is a kind of a relay race. It's not a sprint. It's not about you did the training, put a check mark, I got the change done, users are supposed to use the system. But it's not about one person, right? As I said, it starts from exec sponsorer, and you're just handing on the baton to the business users, and then you're handing on to like change advisories or change champions on the program, and then how do you train the trainer, build your capabilities, and then hand it over to the end users, right? So with all that, I think the question here is, what are some of the change management best practices? And if I kind of go back, I think from a people standpoint, I already talked about getting a dedicated leader, but there are transformations which is not as big. It's not for large enterprise, but yet there needs to be an acknowledgement that who is really the champion for the business, who's representing business. And then when I look at the governance, and this is not now, 15 years ago, I was part of this large utility transformation. They had something called POC, like it was a process owner committee as part of the governance. They met every alternate weeks representing the business. They reviewed every process, every change, which was getting tracked. And they made sure that they were enabling them and accepting those changes rather than, hey, did we capture the change impacts? Let's make it as part of the training. So it's part and parcel of the governance itself is the other thing which I've seen where it's been quite successful. I would suggest that's one of the recommendations from a leading or best practices standpoint. And then when we say we embed them as part of the program, we need to get them at the contract stage itself, meaning every phase should have contract, should have change management deliverables, right? So be it like stakeholder mapping, readiness assessment, communication planning, what does that deliverable looks like upfront? So that way, when we say we do change management at every stage, going back to James' point, it starts day one, not necessarily brought in later, right? So it starts with like exec sponsor being embedded in the program, explaining the why across the stages of all stages of the transformation program, making it part and parcel of the contract, having a dedicated team, having it part of the governance are all some of the leading practices which needs to happen. So I'm not going to talk more into like, I think they're doing training and getting them early to do testing and test the solution and system is pretty good, but that is default as a practice, right? Now, when I look at the second part of the question, how do you empower internal stakeholders? I'll touch upon only two key points there is, like one is you need to tailor the communication. This is not like, okay, there's a change coming, you blast out an email telling this is applicable for everyone. So I would say one of the best practice, again, how do we empower is you need to have a targeted communication happening, right? So by function, by department, by the role. So it becomes like easy for you to enable them and have a good connection of enabling them for the change rather than like, hey, this project is going live or this program is coming, your life is going to change, and here is your set of training. So I think that is something like it needs to be embedded as part of the program. And so the tailored communication really helps. And I've also seen that when they are embedded day one, they also co-create stuff with the project team members. That also is something I've felt when they are part of building it, they're enabled themselves and they're like, now you put their name to it. And anyway, all that is to say is OCM or change management isn't just about getting to go live. It's about enabling people to thrive in the new environment, right? And for their operations, which again, in the last question, both Bernie and Prajat talked about, you do this once in like a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades. So, but how do you make that they are enabled for these operations long term? And it's one of the most human aspects of the transformation, which needs to be taken care of.
Awesome. Vinod, that's great. Maybe Bernie, over to you on this one, but with what Vinod's bringing up, some really good points about, making sure that you have all the way through good user adoption, things like that. What else have you seen?
Yeah, and I mean, I couldn't agree more with Vinod's comments around, when we see these transformations, the ones that struggle when the investment and maybe some of that practical aspect of change management isn't embedded, right? This needs to be funded. It needs to be funded robustly. And that drives the discipline. But it's more than that. I think about clients maybe who have struggled. Often it's, quite honestly, the why wasn't clear. The why wasn't maybe clear from the executive level down, or the why wasn't clear at the working level. What's in it for me? At the end of the day, change is a personal thing. And if you're, a finance person or somebody working in the warehouse, that could be quite different impacts to you. And we need to tailor those messages to be relevant to that particular audience. So that's certainly, when I think about best practices, executive sponsorship, key messages, but then driving it down to that practical level. I also think that with modern ERPs, the change element doesn't stop at go live. Most of our modern ERPs are SaaS platforms, and they're continuously innovating, right? Especially with, things like automation and AI, what we think is relevant today and what might be available 6 months from now could be radically different. And so as organizations think about it's more than getting to go live, it's that ongoing driving additional value. Change has to be part of that as well. And so, I think one of the best practices is making sure that change management is well funded, but the funding continues, the discipline continues beyond that initial go live, so that we're continuously, innovating and helping people to adopt those innovations, because if they're not adopting them, we're not going to get the business value that we're looking from.
Awesome. That's good, guys. Thank you so much for that. I think, we've talked a lot now about, we got some human capital pieces, but I think, this would be a good one. I think Praj will tee you up here in a second, looking at now the technology piece. And this has been, for some of utilities, haven't looked at what's out there in the past 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. What else is out there? How are we now optimizing our technology? How are we optimizing data? So James, let's give you the start on this one. What are some industry best practices for like master data optimization and looking at these changes as you go through this transformation?
Yeah, I think really two pieces that come to mind here. The first is not pigeonholing systems, not saying I need to do everything in this one platform. Again, getting back to best in breed, that truly allows me to optimize the master data. I'm not trying to make my asset accounting system handle, accounts payable, and I'm not trying to have my ERP be the system of record for which assets are in the ground and when I'm going to go inspect them, etc. What is the work driven off of that? And really, to me, the big piece of that comes back to is master data is foundational and the processes that it drives. And that really gets to the changing functionality in industry best practice. To Praj's point earlier, we have systems that were implemented 20, 30 years ago. Companies we've talked to from coast to coast have said, oh, we did this in advance of Y2K or just after Y2K. That was the compelling event for them. But it was, how do I get this quickly? And there wasn't a process reimagination. It was customized to make this fit. And so I had my mainframe processes that were really carried forward. And this really gives you now the time to look at your systems and say, why do we do this? We talked about process mapping at the very start. Vinod touched on that a little bit. It's great to say X and Y happen and Z pushes this button. But if we understand why, that's almost more important and more foundational. And I think, and Praj can probably jump in here on this piece, is that really then allows you from an IT side to tailor the system and systems to meet those needs.
Thanks, James.
Excellent.
Yeah, so this is a topic of a lot of contention. As at EY, we like to say people, process, technology, and data are the four main pillars of transformation. And we look at data very seriously. A lot of the times, folks don't focus on data as much. Companies, as James, you mentioned, they look at it as, oh, we've always done this. It's just, we'll do it right at the very end. I think my job has been to alert businesses, alert companies to the importance of having a data strategy well in advance, at the same time in parallel as a transformation strategy. a lot of the times what all these transformations will give you is a great new system, a great new framework. But if you don't have the right data to fill those boxes, to fill those frameworks, you will not get the amount of benefits that you're expecting, the business cases that you've pitched against. You will not get it because the data has not been addressed. The data strategy has not been implemented. So like James mentioned earlier, adopting leading practices, standardization, making sure that the data is not just pigeonholed in one technology. A lot of the times, because we've been using our systems over multiple decades and different decisions have been made by different folks. So someone loves Microsoft platform, someone loves the SAP platform, someone loves some other platform. I think what is important is, as I mentioned earlier, cross-functional teams, enterprise architecture teams, look at this at a holistic perspective, overarching perspective, not just benefiting one part of the organization or the key parts of the organization, but overall as a whole. Data should actually be a key component when you're reimagining your processes. In a transformation project, that's the best opportunity to reimagine and redesign your business processes. Change management, as we saw, and then an important pillar is data. Definitely advanced data management tools like ADMM by Synity. We look at DataSphere. We've looked at BODs. SAP is coming up with new tools as well in the SAP space. But more than the initial sales pitch, what is important is understand the outcome that you need from this exercise. Understand that this is going to be a long-lasting decision. Decisions you're making today is affecting your organization couple 4 or 5 decades down the line. So really important to be focused on the organization as a whole, not just the tool. The tool should be looked at as a means to an end. The end should be harmonization of data, ease of reporting, ease of data and analytics. A lot of the utilities folks, we go through generate application every year, every couple of years. We have to appear for audits. We have to appear before the utility boards and committees. Key tool in your hand at that point is data. And we hear this a lot, that we don't have the data we need. We've been asked to go back and rework our documents, our audits, our rate applications. The pain point here is data today. So, I'd like to remind everybody, and it's also a part of my mission, is do not ignore data. Don't put it for later. It should be looked at and actioned at in parallel as soon as you begin your design. So I think that helps answer some of that. I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks so much, Raj. Well, I think maybe Vinod, you can kind of take a look at this as well. What are some of the pieces that you've seen in terms of data optimization, technology, what else is out there? It's been a long time for some of these utilities to see what's out in the market.
Yeah, again, I think it's good that I can see the questions kind of building on. The transformation happens once in a lifetime or twice in a lifetime of somebody working at the utility industry. But on this one, when we talk about digital transformation, be it implementing SAP or Oracle, moving to cloud, or embracing any automation or AI, one of the most overlooked and yet foundational element is the master data. And I would agree with James and Project, right? So which is, but I want to put some analogy here, right? To keep it very simple, it is like it is like why I say it's a foundational element is think of it like you're moving into a brand new house, right? You spend time, money on like architecture, finishes, and design. But if you bring every box from your old house into the new one, right, including broken furnitures, and you things like you haven't touched in years, like as an analogy, then you dump them into this beautiful new space, the experience falls flat. It's as simple as like that for you to, when you kind of go on doing an ERP transformation is, when you carry on the legacy data, and if you don't really optimize your master data, it's not only the data, but look at the broader impact is it corrupts the analytics. First of all, why is somebody doing a transformation is they don't have real-time insights at the boardroom to make an executive decision. But if you take the old garbage data into a new solution and you're not optimizing it, you're going to corrupt the analytics again, and then the whole purpose of the transformation falls flat. So we yet focus on process technology, but master data is such a critical component which really needs to be, looked at. And it needs to be optimized. Even if I take the workflow as an example, if you have far too many master data records, which you have not cleansed, you have not optimized, it's going to keep loading. And then we complain that the performance of the tool is not good. SAP could have been better, Oracle could have been better. But the reality is like, I think it's taking a step back, and how do you really ask the questions like, what data do you actually need in the new solution? How current and reliable it is, like when you take it to the new solution, who owns it, and what is the governance you really want to put in place, right? And we work with clients all the time where they spend like a lot of like dollars in terms of like what they want to really update. But we also have clients who understands that they don't need to carry legacy, and they come up with an archiving strategy, etc., right? And there are some regulatory rules for us to do. Anyways, all that is to say is the data optimization is a critical component of any large transformation. It needs to be acknowledged. As I said, the new house and the experience can be good, or the new solution and its experience can be good with most optimized process is only when you are like optimize and take only the relevant data. And because these systems have been built over like decades, they continue to either acquire and grow their business, or they acquire new like master data systems. And each, like what I say, users do have opportunities to continue creating master data, which is the other thing where you need to have proper governance to say what is the process for you to like, and the roles who are really allowed to create that master data. So there are opportunities to optimize. From changing functionality to industry best practice, I treat that as, yes, it is a process driven, there's fit to standard solution, but yet the key activity of optimizing the master data is on its own, and it needs to be given equally importance.
Excellent. I know our PowerPlan's marketing team is on today's webinar. I know they just got excited about something that Vinod said. There's a great quote, and James, I'll tee you up on this one. There's a great quote on our website about what one of our clients talk about, and it's about our credibility. So James, I'll let you kind of take that one away and kind of run with it.
Yeah, I think, and the quote comes from Keith Ferguson, who's the VP and controller at Florida Power and Light, about how credibility is the currency with my regulator. We want to be able to stand behind our numbers, and that's all the more important with the expanded investment that we're seeing in the utility space, especially with the green energy transition in Canada, et cetera. But there's something, Vinod said about, broken furniture into the brand new house that I think is really important for the people on the phone to take a look at. Is really, technology has drastically changed in the last 30 years and the last 20 years since the investment was done. And Bernie had a really good point at the very start about AI coming in, and that's what everyone talks about. But if we look back, 10 years, we've got OCR technology, we've got the ability to advance validations, and there's 20 years of collective knowledge that has now gone into these systems. So this is really the opportunity to go and vet and say what system really fits our need well. Just because we were an SAP shop previously doesn't mean that we shouldn't be looking at Oracle and saying, hey, is there functionality within Oracle Analytics Cloud and bringing everything together under one roof there that makes sense? Or can I add a system like PowerPlan because I've got 50 property accountants on my staff or 20 property accountants? We've gone coast to coast and we've heard people say, hey, I am manually reviewing pick lists to see what assets are going in. I've got an AP staff that is manually typing in invoice information. These are things that can be changed and really optimizing our foundation. It's less about master data from that perspective, but really giving the technology a chance, given what's happened in the last decade.
Awesome. Thanks, James. So I know we're getting close to our end of questions that we had. And, this is one that we did bring in for last week. So we did talk about that, but we knew how critical this was to the space and what you all are looking at right now for which is the right field for me to look at. And, again, to the participants, if you do need to add a question, put it into the chat. We will jump on it towards the end of today's presentation. But let's start this one. Praj, we'll go to you. We'll go to you after James here, because James has been a big part of a lot of ERP transformations on a massive project with PowerPlan for the last 5 years. Maybe James, if you want to reference pieces of that. But what are we seeing right now in terms of brownfield, greenfield? I know when we were at SAP Miami back in the summer of last year, this was again the hot topic everywhere. When we got back from Oracle Users Group and Oracle Edge in Nashville just last month, these are the big topics. So James, why don't you start us off with which is the fields to look at and what are they all about?
Yeah, and I think it's less about what field is best, and it's more about how do I use that field. There's things that we do right today. We wouldn't be operating if we weren't capable of doing that, but there's the knowledge of things can be better. How do we do? And so when you think about greenfield and a phase zero type approach, that really says, hey, let me take an overarching look at my business process and what can be better. If I was going to start from the studs to, continue on the house metaphor, what would I do? And maybe I have a room that I really like what it looks like. Maybe, some of my furniture I'm going to carry forward, but what can be made better? And I think when you see that greenfield first approach and you end up in that kind of bluefield section, if you say, oh, we're going to be bluefield, we're going to look at how we do things, or, even brownfield, that's how we end up with a lot more of like a lift and shift mentality where we spend a lot of money on what ends up just becoming a technical upgrade. You don't get that process improvement. You don't see the business value that's gained because you're saying, hey, what we did fits well. Let me put new technology on top of that. And a lot of times we've seen that actually ends up taking you a little bit backwards. And it goes back to what Bernie talked about with the advancement of technology and moving to a SaaS system, a cloud system. We may not have the capability to do that. I think about SAP sunsetting group assets in S4, that is functionality that coast to coast is relied upon. How are we going to fill that gap in our enterprise? Is it now going to be spreadsheets? Is it now going to be added human capital? Or is it a third-party system that I need to bring in? And if I just say brownfield, everything's going to stay the same, I miss that.
Awesome. Okay, thanks so much, James. Raj, maybe we could start with you to go through, some of these different fields. What are we seeing?
So I'm going to give a reply that is probably unexpected by a lot, but heard by many. So when we were in Florida last year, right, as Richard mentioned, we heard things in favor, pros and cons of brownfield, greenfield, bluefield. Another term that's been thrown out is right field, right? It's field city out there. And everybody has something for and against it. Every consultant you'll talk to will provide a perspective on this. I think James alluded to it a little bit, but what I want to encourage and what all of us will agree on is do something like a phase zero in advance. Understand the level of customization in your organizations. Understand how far have we veered away from industry standard, and then make a decision based on data, based on the results of phase zero. The key thing that I warn and caution clients against is do not make up your mind in advance. Look at what your system is today, then make a decision. Understand what your business goals are. What are your objectives? What are your goals at the end of this? The other thing, I'll talk about a couple more, and I know Vinod and Bernie will touch on the others, is one thing is the business goal. Second is the risk tolerance, right? How much risk can your organization pick up at this point of time, right? With Greenfield, for example, there's a higher risk, but it offers a greater chance of innovation. With brownfield, there's a lot less risk, but then you're also carrying over your baggage. It limits your innovation, right? So keep an eye out, define your business goals, define your outcomes, understand the risks in your organization, and then very important, do all of this based on data. Arrive at the conclusion after. And I'll pass it on to Vinod to provide some of the additional points.
Thanks. So I don't think I'm going to disagree with both James and Prashant. But yeah, this is one of the most common question I get asked, or like all of us on this call get asked, is right. But the truth is the best approach depends on where you're really starting from as a client, right? And what are your transformation goals, right? So I'm not going to touch on the phase zero, which I think is the right recommendation. Prashant already talked about it, which will help. But only the two other questions I would put there is, like, most transformation programs bottom up gets enabled by the end users themselves. What are the inefficiencies? What are the redundancies? And what are some of the mundane work which they have been doing for like years? And like, so that is what gets escalated. How do we make things better? And those are all something you can bring to the phase zero and understand, like, hey, what are some of those bottlenecks, right? And then when I look at from a top down, from an IT standpoint, and given all the technology advancements which we touched on, AI, automation, etc., it's also about how much technical debt are you carrying? Like, what is that technical debt, and then the runway which is getting shrunk. Like, as you know, it was 2027 with, like, for SAP, for example, every solution is going through migrating to cloud. So what does that technical debt look like, right? And most importantly, what outcome are you trying to drive? Like, what efficiencies do you really want? There are clients who really want to reduce cost. There are clients who really want to, who are at having a massive, like, what to say, people who are like close to retirement. How are they going to transform their organization? So it is different for different organizations. So phase zero for sure recommended. And there are tools now available, be it SAP, like Signavio, etc. But point is, it doesn't matter on the technology, but there are tools available to help you evaluate on how close you are to the standard process and how much inefficiencies you got. And but the baseline, the way I define it is, if you want to reimagine from scratch and adopt leading practices, you can fund like a transformation program, and you want to modernize boldly, greenfield is an approach which you can definitely embark on. But if you want to preserve what's working and you want to literally like upgrade to manage the technical debt, etc., go brownfield, because you just didn't reap all the benefits of your previous transformation, maybe. So that is definitely an option. And then if there are things like, if, as Prajat said, you want to just selectively transfer certain areas and you don't want to, like, you don't have inefficiencies across all the departments. And it's very different for different clients, right? I've worked with clients who have transformed their business over 15 years through many different programs. And maybe one of those projects didn't go well, but the 4 others did very well. So which is, now when you're going to a new transformation, you have 4 things which are working good out of, like, this only one which did not really work well. So how do you really like transform that portion? So the good news is you have options, right? So that's the thing. So if I want to summarize, I say don't start by selecting the field, as Prajak said. Like, the design path forward should be based on your goals and what do you really want to achieve, and what is that you can really afford as well. At the end of the day, each one of these has different price tags associated with it. So you really want to decide on what's really right for you as a client, and at what intersection of your journey in your transformation you are at, and you need to decide that. And phase zero could be a nice tool.
Thanks, Vinod. As I said to to participants, we did use this question last week because we do think it is important for everybody to see. And Bernie, I'm going to give this to you in a second. Maybe bring it home for 6 out of 6 recommend that phase zero is a great idea. But maybe over to you. Bring us home on this question.
Well, I won't break the trend there, but I wanted to talk a little bit about this from an Oracle perspective, because that's sort of my domain of expertise. And it's interesting that I think there's maybe even a fourth option called no field, is what I'm going to term it, where you don't. Oracle's continuing to support its legacy platforms. They're supported for 10 years. They're continuing to deliver value there. That may be a valid option for some organizations. I guess the theme that I think about is this needs to be a decision based on, I go back to some of my comments initially about business case and drivers and vision and those aspects. So the decision on which field is applicable and relevant and suited for a particular organization needs to be based on the context of what you're trying to achieve. It may be very suitable to do a brownfield, like I say, call the Oracle, lift and shift your legacy applications onto cloud infrastructure, because maybe you've got some aging infrastructure that's coming up for a massive renewal. That may be a very valid approach. It comes with the trade-offs that you likely won't, gain the efficiencies of what would come with a process renewal and process consolidation and standardization. And you may not gain the efficiencies and value of some of the tools that we see in the modern ERPs, and improved experience of your employees and of your suppliers who can use chatbots and those types of things. So those are the trade-offs, but I think all of the options are appropriate, but need to be considered in the context of what the organization is trying to achieve. Then the budget, as Vinod was saying, those are all factors then that drive into your business case.
Excellent. Okay, so we can firmly say 6 out of 6 say phase zero is a good way to go. And then we learned about a no field. So that was exciting too. Thanks, Bernie. Okay, let's move into to question number 5. When I was looking at this one, And, I thought about, modern tools, what else is out there? And James, I'm going to start with you on this one. But when we see like what's going out there in the space right now, myself and my colleagues got back from DTech in Nashville about 2 weeks ago, so Distributech. And to see all the different systems, technology partners that are out there, system partners that are out there, all the new toys that are available to you, and not just everybody talking about AI. There's a lot of great new modern tools that are available. And I think, these are why we like to have these sessions with everybody to say, like, what else is out there? How can we start to looking at different technology to help build this transformation? So, James, why don't you start us off with this question? What are we seeing here?
For sure. And I really, from an integration perspective, I think is the big focus of how do we make sure that systems can talk to each other based on everything that's been said as part of the conversation today. How am I getting data flowing between systems? How am I enabling best in breed tools? And I think you're seeing both platforms really do a good job with that. SAP's, developer community, having certified adapters. PowerPlan brings a certified adapter because we know integrating with that is going to be important. I think about Oracle and, maybe teeing it up for Bernie a little bit, but OIC and the ability to co-host other solutions within OIC, so you're, easy to connect between the two, and the framework that they provide for people, and then the add-on tools and the ability to get data out of there, having API frameworks to build data out of legacy systems and out of new systems that we're implementing into best in breed data tools. I think about Fusion Analytics Warehouse, some of the projects I'm working on, it's, hey, can we hook PowerPlan up, a third-party system, right into our FAW or into our SAP, analytics cloud? Can I feed that data into DataSphere? And the answer is yes. And it gives everybody the ability to really deal with the data they want in a timely fashion. And that's a huge piece. And I think it really helps empower the company going forward and the employee of the future to make it so that they're getting the data how they want it and can experience it in a platform that they're familiar with, versus having to learn 5 different tools and 7 different ways to access the data.
Awesome. And I know a little bit of a PowerPlan commercial on here, but we're talking about integration points. And I know just yesterday, James, we were looking at for a utility that we were looking at our SAP adapter. And I am not by any means anybody with high IT, but if there's some IT folks on here, we had a fantastic system context diagram, and this SAP adapter from PowerPlan had 9 different integration points into it. I was blown away. I think that's pretty well that we can have. And maybe Bernie, from the Oracle side, I know James is talking about an Oracle adapter, but what are some of the pieces that you're seeing as well?
Yeah, I echo what James was saying about, there are, integration platforms that are third party and certainly very robust in the marketplace. But I think when you embark on an ERP program and think about the integration points for ERPs, strong consideration, and I think most of the ERP vendors now have their own integration platform that's highly robust. And what I see as the key advantages is that those adapters and those pre-configured integration points, whether it's Oracle Financials to Workday or Oracle Financials to Concur for expenses, those things are delivered out of the box. And when we think about, risk profiles and cost savings to the project, tremendous efficiencies there in those, having that ready to go and proven by many others in the industry. Also, these tools deal with the complexities of not just the technology integration, but the process orchestration and the process integration. And when you think about all of the steps in an end-to-end process, maybe across multiple systems, having a robust tool to manage that workflow and that process integration and orchestration, super key to making sure there's a good outcome at the end of the day.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bernie. Prad, maybe we can give you this question too.
Yeah, so I want to provide a little bit of a different perspective, because I know everybody's heard everything there is about external system enablement. But one thing we observed, or that I regularly observe, is a lot of the utilities also have some citizen development, their own employees doing a lot of these integration developments. Power Platform is very popular. Ease of use, UiPath is the other one that people very frequently used to get to these integration objectives. I think the key point of view or the key part of the puzzle here is to look at what works best for you and your organization. Gone are the days when the consultants used to come in and used to wow the audience. Now everybody's very doing citizen developments. They're all agile. They're all adapted. They know what's in the market. And gone are the days, when there used to be one monolith ERP and everybody had to get in line and agree with it. What we're seeing more and more nowadays with citizen development, with Power Platforms, with MuleSoft, like there's multiple integrations coming into picture. The jobs of enterprise architects is becoming harder and harder. But the message in all of this is to adapt and adopt, right? Like look at what the latest tools are. Look at what's easy to use, like transform the ownership from the IT department to some of the business owners. Give them the tools, enable them, empower them, and reduce some of your IT burden. That's also a new emerging trend that we're seeing. More and more users are becoming conscious, are becoming aware, are becoming technology, that what used to be averse, now they want to be technology forward. So DevOps is another classic example that we can use for external tools, right? So all of these, a combination of what we've discussed so far, to streamline integration of data and then make access easier. Obviously, segregation of duties, make sure the roles are aligned, etc. But I think that's my point of view or take on this thing.
Excellent. That's great. Thank you so much, Praj. And I know we only have a few minutes left, and so thank you for those that have put the questions in. If we don't get to them today, I know we can definitely reach out to you through Electricity Canada, but maybe Vinod, can we give you some time, a couple of minutes, maybe to kind of look at this one?
I mean, I think it's talked, so maybe only a couple of data points I would like to add. One is, I mean, SAP themselves as an enterprise solution has changed their reference architecture, right, to accommodate more and more of these modern tools to come in, right, through their BTP platform. It's not anything new, as James said. There've been quite a lot of certified products which has been embedded and working through with SAP, but I think the acknowledgement of the change to the reference architecture of how they integrate and the data being streamlining in itself is an acknowledgement that there's going to be more and more of these nimble products and solutions which client can afford more easily, a lot cheaper, and it makes more sense because that's a niche product for a particular industry, right? And then the second aspect which I want to just highlight is the ERP in itself today is a composable ERP. Gone are the days where we used to do those very large rip and replace ERP platforms. It's all SaaS solutions. You can start with any business function. You can go to a different business, and all of them gets integrated. Again, the advancement of the data integration and the integration layer itself to exchange the data and information has become like, what to say, as technologically advanced. You can get near real-time data in in no time, in other words. And I've done projects in the past where we used to pass messages, iDocs in an RFC queue, and if it gets stuck, you're like the whole call center is stuck for like a day. But those days are gone. Like it's all API enabled. So anyway, it's all about composable ERP. The reference architecture is changing. So it's an acknowledgement of how the technology is developed. And I think more and more clients should look for what are some of those niche solutions and products before they choose any solution as such. It would be my recommendation.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Vinod. Well, I know we're nearing on time. Maybe Fran, I can pass it maybe back over to you.
Perfect. Oh, this has been a very lively and great discussion. So I appreciate everybody's contributions and participation. Unfortunately, today we won't have any time for questions, but that's okay. We'll definitely strive to reach out to anybody that has questions after the fact. Feel free to reach out to us at events@electricity.ca. And we'll be happy to facilitate those. But we'll conclude here for now due to time. I'd like to thank everybody on the call, PwC, EY, KPMG, and certainly our partners at PowerPlan for facilitating and hosting this session with us. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time. Have a safe and great rest of your days, and we'll hope to see you at the next conversation series. Until then, bye for now. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, team.